I want to tell you something about how a single afternoon can undo 63 years of believing you understood people. It started with a voicemail. 11 seconds. My daughter-in-law's voice, flat and certain, the way someone sounds when they've already decided and just need to inform you. I listened to it twice in the parking lot of the Loblaws on Carling Avenue, engine still running, groceries on the back seat going warm. She said, "We've talked it over, and we think it's best if you don't come to the cottage this summer. The kids need time with just us. You understand." I sat there until the car beeped at me for leaving the keys in too long. Before I tell you what happened next, please share in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know which city or province you're joining us from today. My son-in-law's mother's engagement. He married Diane 8 years ago at a small ceremony in Almonte, the kind of wedding where the reception is held in a Legion Hall and everyone says it's charming and means it. I liked Diane then. She was efficient and organized, and she made Kevin laugh, which was more than I'd managed to do in the years after his mother passed. I gave them the down payment on their house in Conata, $52,000, not a loan, a gift. I said it plainly when I handed Kevin the certified check across the kitchen table. "This is for you both, no strings." Kevin hugged me. Diane said thank you twice, quickly, and moved on to talking about square footage. That was 4 years ago. The cottage had been in my family since before Kevin was born. My wife Helen and I bought it in 1987 for $38,000, a 2-bedroom place on Clear Lake near Carlton Place, with a dock that listed slightly to the left, and a wood stove that smelled like pine and old smoke every time you lit it. Helen died in 2019. The cottage passed to me, sole ownership, because that is how we had always held it, 2 names on the deed until there was one. After Helen, I started going to the cottage alone in May and September, the shoulder months when the lake was quiet and the loons came back. In the summers, Kevin and Diane brought the grandchildren. I paid for the propane, the dock repairs, the new pump when the old one seized up in 2022. That one cost me $4,000, and I didn't mention it to anyone. It's a family place, I thought. That's what you do. I was not aware that I'd been accumulating a kind of account that other people had already decided was closed. The voicemail came on a Thursday afternoon in late May. I'd been at Loblaws buying the kind of food you buy when you are 63 and alone, a rotisserie chicken, some Greek yogurt, 2 apples, a small bag of coffee. I had also bought a box of those fruit popsicles my granddaughter Lily likes, thinking I'd bring them up to the cottage on the long weekend in July. I put the popsicles back in the freezer when I got home. I did not call Kevin back that night. I am not sure why exactly. Part of it was that I didn't trust my voice to stay level. Part of it was something older than that, some instinct that said, wait, sit with this, let it show you what it is. I made dinner. I ate it at the kitchen table by the window, the same table where I had signed over the check 4 years ago. Outside, the neighbor's maple was just coming into its early summer green. I watched it for a long time. Helen would have called Kevin within the hour. She was not a woman who let things sit and sour. She believed in saying the thing directly and being done with it. "I am more like still water," she used to say, and she didn't always mean it as a compliment. That night I went to the filing cabinet in the second bedroom. It's a gray metal one, the kind with the stiff drawer that you have to lift slightly to pull open. Inside were the folders I'd kept for 30 years, taxes, insurance, the cottage deed, the receipts from every major repair. I found the original purchase agreement from 1987, Helen's signature and mine, side by side. I found the 2022 invoice from the pump company. I found the receipts for the dock resurfacing, the roof repair on the boathouse, the propane account that I had set to automatic withdrawal from my personal checking. I made a cup of tea and sat with the folders spread out on the kitchen table. Then I opened my laptop and looked at my bank account. The automatic propane withdrawal was scheduled for the 15th. The dock maintenance company I'd hired for spring opening had processed 3 days ago. I had been maintaining a property for 8 years where I was now, apparently, a guest who was no longer welcome. I closed the laptop. I did not sleep much that night. The next morning, I called my old friend Roy. We'd known each other since our 20s, worked together at the same civil engineering firm for 15 years before he took early retirement and I stayed on another decade. Roy is the kind of man who listens without filling silences. We met for coffee at a Tim Hortons on Richmond Road, the one with the awkward corner table where you can talk without anyone nearby. I told him what the voicemail said. I told him about the cottage, the check, the propane bill. Roy wrapped both hands around his large double-double and looked at me for a moment. "Does Kevin know you pay for all of it?" he said. "I assumed so," I said. Roy nodded slowly. "Assuming is what gets us." He didn't say anything dramatic after that. He just said, "What do you want to do?" And something about the way he asked it, not "what should you do" or "what are you going to do," but "what do you want," made me understand that I actually had options. I drove home and sat in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. I did call Kevin that afternoon. He answered on the second ring, which meant he was expecting me. "Dad," he said. The way he said it had a shape to it, like he'd rehearsed what came after and was finding the beginning of the path. "I got Diane's message," I said. "Yeah." A pause. "Look, it's nothing personal. The kids are at an age where they need routine. Having extra people around disrupts the dynamic." Extra people? I had taught Kevin to swim in that lake. I had driven him to hockey practice at 5:30 in the morning for 6 winters. I had sat in the hospital with him for 11 hours when Lily was born because Diane's parents lived in Calgary and couldn't get there until the next day. "I understand," I said, "because I did. Not the way he meant it. But I understood exactly what was happening." "Great," Kevin said with the relief of someone who thought the hard part was over. "We'll have you down for a weekend in the fall once things settle." I said that sounded fine. I hung up and went back to the kitchen table. The next morning I called the propane company and canceled the automatic withdrawal. The woman on the phone asked for a reason. "Change in circumstances," I said. Then I called the dock maintenance company and left a message canceling the fall service I'd pre-booked. Then I called my lawyer. Her name is Sandra. She has been my lawyer since the late 90s, and she has the particular quality of not being surprised by anything. "The cottage deed," I said. "Sole ownership. Can I list it?" "Yes," she said. "It's yours. You can do what you like with it." "What about Kevin?" "He has no legal interest in it. Does he know you're considering this?" "Not yet," I said. There was a pause, not judgment, just Sandra measuring her words the way she always does. "If you proceed, he will." "I know," I said. I listed the cottage 2 weeks later through an agent in Carlton Place, a woman named Faye who had sold 3 other places on that lake and knew its rhythms. She walked through the cottage on a gray Tuesday afternoon in early June. I stood with my hands in my pockets while she took notes. She paused at the window that looks out over the dock and the water. "Any reason you're selling?" she asked, careful the way people are when they can feel a story behind a question. "Time for a change," I said. She nodded. "It'll move quickly. Lakefront in this county is going fast." She was right. An offer came within 10 days. A couple from Ottawa, both teachers, early 40s, 2 children. They'd been looking for 2 years. Their agent said they fell in love with the dock and the wood stove. The offer was $14,000 under asking. I thought about the stove, the way Helen used to sit in front of it in October with a book and a glass of wine, and I said yes. I told no one. Kevin called on a Sunday morning in late June, 2 days after the sale closed. I was sitting on my back patio with coffee, watching a cardinal work through the feeder. "Dad," his voice was different this time, tighter. "I got a call from someone at the lake. They said the cottage sold." "It did," I said. Silence. "You sold the cottage?" "Yes." "Without talking to me?" "It was my cottage, Kevin." "That's..." He stopped. Started again. "Mom would never have done that." That one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. I set my coffee down on the arm of the chair and looked at the cardinal. It had found something it liked and was working at it steadily. "Your mother would never have been uninvited from her own family's cottage," I said. He didn't say anything for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had gone flat, the way it does when he's trying to control something. Diane is upset. I imagine she is. You did this to punish us. I did this because it was my property, and I made a decision about my property, the same way you and Diane made a decision about who was welcome for the summer. That's not the same thing. I know you don't think so. He hung up, not with a slam, just a quiet click, which was somehow worse. Diane called 20 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 2 minutes long and covered. In order, how could I do this to my grandchildren? How selfish I was. How she had always tried to make me feel welcome, and how her therapist would have something to say about this kind of passive-aggressive behavior. At the end, her voice shifted from anger into something more like hurt. Roy was right, I said out loud to no one in the kitchen. I forwarded the voicemail to Sandra and let it be. I did not hear from Kevin for 3 weeks. Then an email arrived. Diane's writing style, but Kevin's name at the top. The kind of collaborative document you produce when you want something to look considered. It said they were consulting a family lawyer about whether the sale of a family asset without notification constituted some form of actionable conduct. The word estate appeared twice. The word grandchildren appeared 4 times. I read it, then printed it, then put it in the gray filing cabinet in the folder I had started labeling simply with the year. Sandra reviewed it. There's no claim here, she said. The property was yours. The sale was legal. They can consult whoever they like. She paused. Do you want to respond? Not yet, I said. One evening in July, I drove out to Carlton Place, not to the Cottage Road. I just drove along the county highway with the windows down, the way you do when you need to move, but don't have anywhere specific to be. The canola fields were coming into yellow, and the sky was doing something complicated with clouds and late light. I pulled over once on a gravel shoulder and just sat. I thought about the first summer Kevin swam across to the little island off the dock. He was 9. He wanted to do it without a life jacket, and I followed him in the rowboat the whole way, not saying anything, just being there in case. He made it and stood on the island rocks with his arms out and yelled something that the wind took before it reached me. When he got back in the boat, he was shaking from the cold and grinning so hard his face looked like it belonged to someone older. I thought about that for a long time. Then I drove home. It was Roy who told me that Kevin had called him. Roy mentioned it one morning over coffee, matter-of-factly, the way he tells me most things. He wanted to know if I thought you were acting rationally, Roy said. What did you say? I said you were the most rational person I knew. I said rational doesn't always mean what people want it to mean. Kevin sent a text in August. Not an email, a text. Short. Dad, can we talk? I read it at the kitchen table after supper and thought about the 11-second voicemail from Diane in the Loblaws parking lot. I thought about the word extra. I texted back, yes. When you're ready to have a real conversation, I'm here. He didn't respond for 5 days. Then he called. We met at a diner in Nepean, the kind of place with laminate tables and coffee that comes in those thick mugs that never quite get clean. He was already there when I arrived. He looked tired. Not the tired of not sleeping, but the tired of having thought about something too long without resolving it. I sat down across from him. The waitress came and we both ordered coffee without looking at the menu. I didn't know you were still paying for everything at the cottage, he said after a moment. I know, I said. Diane said you must have some list somewhere, keeping track. I don't have a list, I said. I just have receipts, because that's what you keep. He turned his mug in a slow circle. She's embarrassed, he said, about the voicemail. She wouldn't have phrased it that way if she'd known I hadn't talked to you first. But the decision was the same, I said, not unkindly, just plainly. He looked up. He has Helen's eyes. I've never gotten used to that. Yeah, he said. The decision was the same. We sat with that for a minute. The diner was quiet for a Tuesday. Someone at the counter was reading a newspaper, the actual paper kind, and the sound of turning pages was the loudest thing in the room. I'm not asking to undo it, I said. I'm not asking for an apology you haven't meant yet. I'm just telling you that there are limits, and I found mine. He nodded, didn't look away this time. I raised you on my own for 6 years, I said. After your mother's first surgery, you know that. I know. I didn't do any of that to be owed something, but I didn't do it to be told I'm extra either. He put his elbows on the table and pressed his fingers against his forehead. He stayed like that for a moment. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. Quiet, not rehearsed. I let it sit. I didn't rush to smooth it over or say it was fine. Helen would have, and it would have cost her. I'd learned that from watching her. Thank you, I said finally. We finished our coffee. He paid the bill, which surprised me. We stood in the parking lot for a moment in the way that men do when they're not sure if a handshake or something else is called for. He ended up putting a hand briefly on my shoulder before he got into his car. I stood there until his taillights were around the corner. The proceeds from the cottage sale went into a GIC at my credit union on Marival. The rate was decent, and I had no immediate plans for the money. Some mornings I thought about what Helen would have said about all of it. She would have been furious, I think, but she also had a way of getting to the other side of fury faster than anyone I've known. I started going back to Roy's weekly coffee with a rotating group of men from the old firm. Some retired, some still consulting part-time. We met Thursday mornings at a cafe on Bank Street, the corner table, same order every week. Nobody talked about their feelings directly, but we talked about everything else, which amounted to the same thing eventually. One Thursday, the man next to me, a structural engineer named Albert who I'd known 20 years, said, "You seem different this year." "How so?" I asked. He thought about it. "Less careful," he said, "like you stopped measuring before you spoke." I told him a shortened version of the cottage story. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Smart. You can't spend your whole life being the answer to someone else's problem." I thought about that on the drive home. In September, Kevin and I had dinner at his place in Kanata. Lily sat beside me at the table and talked about her grade 3 teacher with the intensity of someone presenting an important legal case. Her younger brother threw a piece of carrot at the dog. Diane was quiet in the way of someone who is making an effort. I respected the effort. We did not discuss the cottage or the sale or the voicemail. We talked about the upcoming hockey season and whether the Senators had a realistic chance at anything this year, and Lily's theory about why her classroom smelled like crayons even though no one used crayons anymore. At the end of the night, Diane walked me to the door. She started to say something, then stopped. Started again. "I should have been the one to call you," she said, "not leave a voicemail." "Yes," I said, "but here we are." She nodded. I think she appreciated that I didn't make her say more than she had. Some things don't need the full shape of an apology to land. I drove home on the 417, windows cracked, radio on low. I thought about Clear Lake and the way the light comes off the water on May mornings before anyone else is awake. The loons calling from somewhere you can't see. The coffee you drink standing on the dock because there are no chairs out yet and you didn't bother to bring one. I thought, I'll find another lake. Not yet, but eventually. That's something I've come to understand in the years since Helen died and the months since that 11-second voicemail in a Loblaws parking lot. You can grieve a thing and still make space for what comes next. The two aren't in competition. The clearing out of one thing is sometimes exactly how the next thing finds you. Roy called it being more honest with yourself than you've been. Albert called it stopping the measuring. Helen would have called it finally. I'm still working on what to call it myself. But some nights, sitting by the back window with the last of my coffee and the street quiet outside, I think it might just be this, knowing the difference between a door that's closing on you and a door you're choosing to walk out of yourself. The view on the other side isn't always what you expected, but it's yours, and that, I've learned, turns out to matter more than almost anything else. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes after you've made a decision you can't take back. Not silence exactly, more like the absence of noise you've been making for years without realizing it. I remember sitting on my back patio the morning after Kevin's call, watching that cardinal at the feeder and thinking, This is what it feels like when you stop pretending something is fine because it's easier than saying it isn't. I didn't sell the cottage out of anger. I want to be clear about that because I've turned it over enough times to know the difference. Anger is hot and fast. What I felt was something slower. It was the recognition that I had been measuring my own worth by how much I could give. And the people I was giving to had quietly agreed with that measure without ever saying so out loud. Diane's voicemail just made the math visible. There's a cause to every outcome, and if you're honest, you can usually trace it back. I had given the down payment without conditions. I had paid the propane, the dock, the pump, without mentioning it, not because I was keeping score. I genuinely wasn't, but because I believed that doing the right thing quietly was a kind of virtue, and it is. But there's a line between quiet generosity and making yourself invisible, and I had crossed it so gradually I hadn't felt it happen. The outcome, being called extra in a voicemail, was the direct result of years of me agreeing, through my silence, that my presence mattered less than my contributions. What I had to find again was something I think I'd set down somewhere in the years after Helen died. A kind of clear-eyed understanding of my own situation. Not cynicism, not suspicion, just the willingness to look at what was actually in front of me and call it what it was. Kevin is a good man, and I believe that. But good people inside uncomfortable arrangements can make choices that aren't good, and I had made it too easy for that to happen by never naming what I needed in return. The moment I started reading those receipts at the kitchen table, really reading them, not just filing them, something shifted. I understood that clarity isn't unkind. It's actually the most honest form of care you can offer someone, including yourself. And then there was the harder part, doing something about it. Calling Sandra, calling Faye, signing the papers, sitting in that diner across from Kevin while he worked out what he wanted to say and letting the silence do its work instead of rushing to fill it. That took something I don't have a clean word for, the willingness to hold a difficult position without softening it into something more comfortable, without apologizing for it just because it made people I loved unhappy. Roy called it rational. Albert called it less careful. I think it was just choosing myself, maybe for the first time in a long time, which turned out to be the only way to stay in honest relationship with anyone else. Lily still tells me about her teacher with the crayon smell. Kevin still calls on Sundays sometimes. The cottage is on Clear Lake with a young couple who needed it more than I needed what it had become. I don't know yet what comes next, but I know the difference now between holding on out of habit and choosing something because it still belongs to you. That difference turns out to be worth quite a lot.